least I got great health and such. And so I work for a program at Family Service Agency in a program called the Regional Prevention Provider Program. And my area of expertise is related to prevention and implementing prevention practices, not so much related to treatment or mental health treatment or even substance abuse treatment. I can explain and talk a little bit about alcoholism, and there's even a trend even now. So even when we're encouraged not to refer to people who may have a substance abuse problem, not to call them either addicts or alcoholics or even say alcoholism is these days, what's that other term? Politically correct to say disorder. So a substance abuse disorder is more along the lines. And there's a national initiative called Stop the Stigma. And so rather than referring to people as alcoholic, or addict or whatever it may be. But however, if you want to learn a lot about people who get help and go to one of those open sessions at Alcoholics Anonymous. But in that audience, that's how they introduce themselves. They say I'm an alcoholic. They're not concerned about the stigma, because part of the problem with substance abuse disorders or alcoholism, or whether it's crack or heroin or any of those particular items, it's like a chronic disease. And that's why those disorders or substance abuse have been defined as a chronic disease, because people cannot help themselves. Once they get hooked, it gets in the system. And it's not just the physical part of it, but it's also that mental and emotional attachments that people get to whatever their substance is. And in addition to that, what I also want to provide information with you guys about is, when it comes to addictive behaviors, it doesn't matter what it is. So you may hear about people having a substance abuse disorder or addiction, but people can also be addicted to church. The other popular addiction is sex. So you have a testimony about church. Oh, she said food. So yes, you can have these addictions. I mean, people to bike riding, to food, to sex, to church, lots of different type of behaviors. Even people who are addicted to they gotta steal. And it's just part of them, and it's very difficult. And that's why when they say chronic, it's just beyond their control. And that's something that I learned when I first got into prevention, and I wanted to know and understand more about addictive behaviors. I went to some of those 12-step meetings, 12-step sessions, and some of what they talked about and shared, they talk about they are unable to control themselves. I do not have control. And they also talk about having a higher power. It doesn't matter what that higher power may be, whether it's some type of religion or whatever that belief system is. They talk about using that higher power to help them overcome that addictive behavior or substance abuse disorder. And it's also even more so and appropriate to say substance abuse rather than just say drug abuse, because lots of people, there are other items that substances that people get addicted to, let's say, and they're not necessarily drugs. Because there are people, when I lived in San Antonio from January of 1985 till December of 1986. And a very popular substance of abuse in San Antonio, and especially among youth and Hispanic males 35 years old, was to huff gasoline. Yes, that was a real popular, it was inexpensive. And you could get it easy. You can go in and get a nickel worth of gas. It's an easy to access substance. So you can walk around all day long, pick up pennies. I guarantee you keep looking down, because I pick up every penny I see. Every penny I see, if I can get to it, I'm picking it up. It's going in my pocket. I'm not addicted to it, but I see that money, I'm picking it up. Okay, but that was a real, and so it's more appropriate to say substance abuse disorder or substance disorder. And And we if you think back during the heyday of the crack pandemic, and refer to people as crack addicts and all of that crack behavior. There's there's also, so you got all the different types of behaviors. Number one, so in April as well, there's a national initiative. It's National Alcohol Awareness Month. And so again, alcoholism is one of those drugs that is readily available, and you'll be amazed as well that a lot of adults and especially young people don't categorize alcohol as a drug. And that's because you can walk to the store and buy it, and it's legal. So you can walk to the store and buy it. So, and it's legal. But it is a drug that has major effect on people in the United States of America. It is one of the leading causes of death, as well as leading causes of automobile crashes in the United States. And so it is there and it's very prevalent. So again, I encourage you to think about addictive behaviors being, let's say, a disorder or even also substance abuse. And so again, my main specialty is related to implementing prevention practices for various types of problems in the community. So it doesn't matter whether it's violence, whether it's access to firearms, whether it's drugs, whether it's teen pregnancy, whether it's school dropout. My area of expertise is about how to implement prevention practices. And that includes implementing prevention practices for alcoholism or substance abuse addiction. And so in prevention, one of the first steps that we take and start looking at when there's an issue, whether it's some type of disorder or behavior, what we look at and encourage communities to do is to say, let's look at our community, let's look at families, let's look at schools, and let's look at individuals. So we break it down in terms of looking at risk factors what are community risk factors that contribute to that behavior, what are our family risk factors that contribute to that behavior, and what are school risk factors that contribute to that behavior, what are individual risk factors that contribute to that behavior. So some of those community risk factors could be the availability and easeability of various types of drugs. You also have laws or norms that are favorable towards that type of behavior as well. I think back when I'm from Helena, Arkansas, which is on the east side of Arkansas, but I can remember growing up as a kid in elementary school, walking over to the park, and there was a street called Cherry Street, and where it intersected at Cherry Street and Adams. Cherry Street and Adams, there was a large old cherry tree on that corner. And you could go by there almost any time, and there'd always be about 4 or 5 black men sitting around in some chairs. That'd be an old 55-gallon drum, and if it was cold, they'd have fire going. But they'd all be sitting around there, and they'd all be drinking. I do not recall a time walking past there, and they were not drinking. Now, the police knew they were there. Everybody, people in the neighborhood knew they was there. You go downtown, people talk about them, same group, pretty much, on a regular basis. That's one of those community norms. Just say it's okay to be outside and drink. Now, another community norm you might look at, let's say, City of Little Rock, was when we had used to have Riverfest, but it's not called Riverfest anymore. Okay. But you also have the county fair. So we tell our kids don't drink, don't do this, and we take them to the county fair, and Budweiser and Miller Lite and folks walking around drinking and might even be smoking as well. And so it's like setting that double standard, but it is one of those community risk factors that promote that kind of behavior among our youth. So it sends a double message. Another one being a family risk factor. And so you think about what was the family like? What was their behavior like? Now, it's not always guaranteed that even if you got family members who may be substance abuse users or into certain types of behaviors, whether they was in a gang or been to prison, other types of behaviors, there's no guarantee that the children are going to take on that behavior. Just like there's no guarantee that if you got great parents who break their neck for their kids and they still turn out or make some other crazy choices. There's no guarantee. But however, when you have those various other risk factors there, and there are lots of others. I have also learned that there are some DNA encoding in some of our children. And I've been a foster parent and adoptive parent for a lot of children. And I've had some children, they had the best of the best, but something that they was encoded in them from the birth family. And that's the behavior that they displayed. Another story I like to give is a fellow who used to manage what is known as the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. And he told us a story about during the crack epidemic, and there used to be lots of people would ride along with the police and they would go to these crack houses and raid these crack houses. And he told this story about him and some police officers went into this well-known crack house and went in there and they're going from room to room. And it was just a generation of family members who sold drugs in that house. But they got to the door of one of the bedrooms, and on the door was this sign that said, "No drugs allowed." And they knocked on the door as a 15-year-old girl who's living in the house. Straight A student, doing well. But again, the risk factor was there, but she had this sign on her door, having to live in the house with grandparent, mom, some uncles, I believe, as well, selling crack in the house. But again, it put her at risk, but fortunately, something inside her, some DNA, whatever it was encouraged her not to be involved with that. Then another risk factor being related to school and individuals. So a lot of times if we have kids who fail early in school, antisocial, one of the big issues a lot of times as well, that when we've had school shootings has been children who were bullied in the school and they came back to take revenge on those who bullied them. We have various situations like that. And it also puts them at risk for substance abuse, alcoholism, other behaviors. And then we have individuals, and just something about some of us, we just have an attitude to overcome, or that's just the way they are. Because I can think back to kids in my neighborhood, two of them in particular, it's just straight knuckleheads. All the time, like, wow, and it's like, are you gonna ever grow out of it? And then turn into it, even into adulthood, but they just have this rebelliousness, or you have other kids who alienate themselves in some way and in some capacity. So you look at, and so again, what we do is help communities look at implementing prevention. And that's what we start with. What's putting the community at risk, what's putting families at risk, what's putting individuals at risk, and what are school risk factors, and how do we do that? How do we make that happen? When I think back to my days at North End Elementary, I went to an all-black elementary school, and the attitude that was promoted through the school building, the teachers made it very clear. You will learn, and you will learn. And yes, we are going to whip your behind if you act a fool in the school. But we don't care who your mama is. We don't care if you're dirt poor. We don't care if you come to school with no shoes. Doesn't matter. If your hair nappy, we don't care if you didn't brush your teeth. Your job is to come in this building and you will learn. And that left a lasting impression on me, for me anyway, in moving forward through our life. And so it's important that we look at that. And we look at children who have to be in those types of negative environments, substance abusing environments, substance abusing families. And it's important to come up with methods and ways to help them so that they don't in turn turn into those types of behaviors. So there's a reason that they end up being successful. There's a reason of something that grabs hold to them, and they're able to come up with a reason or way to do well. So they may either bond with others. City of Little Rock has those summer programs, Brother Barnett talked about, we share and talk about, and those programs, that's part of creating a bonding in the community. So the kids find a way to bond, giving them opportunities for success, and as well as well-known opportunities for success. And it's one thing to say, just do we have opportunities for success? And that's what those summer programs are about. It creates opportunities for success. Now, some of the other problems that may get in the way of that is, are the youth able to access it? Can they get to it? Can they be a part of it? So it's always a challenge. And as I always like to ask people, when you develop a program, how does your program get to the audience? How does the audience get to your program? And so whether that is related to substance abuse issues. Are you finding the right help, getting the right help? Now, again, like I said, I want to emphasize again, I don't do therapy and I don't attempt to do therapy. At the Family Service Agency, we have a program that's called Drug and Alcohol Safety Education Program. That program, and I hope I don't see any of you online people, anybody in here either over at the agency, it's for when people get DUIs or get DWIs. And during that time, in this court order, the individual has to go get an assessment. The Drug and Alcohol Safety Education Program coordinator will do an assessment with individual clients. We'll sit down with them and determine what is their degree or level of disorder, what it may be. So do they need to go to a class for a few hours or several number of sessions, or do they need to really see a substance abuse counselor, or even if they need to be inpatient treatment to some degree? So that's what our Drug and Alcohol Safety Education Program does. And we do have some substance abuse counselors that sit down with people and assist them with going through their process. They're what they call evidence-based methods. One of them is called motivational interview, which is a process of, it's a series of steps and processes to help people who are in treatment and get treatment. So you can do that, and you get, there are other types. And then, like I mentioned earlier as well, is go to 12 steps. Because in most cases, getting counseling costs money. And a lot of people cannot afford to get the money, to pay for that. But you can also, there's also Narcotics Anonymous and also Alcoholics Anonymous. And Wolf Street in Little Rock is well known for providing a lot of help to a lot of individuals who have substance abuse disorders and have gone over there and gotten that help. And there are other organizations as well. And so when you also look at children of alcoholic families, sometimes you can look at, there's this theory that within a substance abusing family, that family members take on various roles within the family. So you have the substance abuser. That's the person that's causing the main problem within the family itself, whether their substance of choice is alcohol, heroin, or prescription drugs, but the substance abuser person themselves. Then you will have what's known as the chief enabler. Usually the chief enabler is either going to be a spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it may be. That person is always going to make excuses for the person who has that substance abuse problem. That life is hard on the substance abuser, but they always look for an excuse for the substance abuser, and they have a tendency to stay with that substance abuser. And if you didn't know, even if you got situations where there's domestic violence, about 90% or more of the women who leave the man who's abuser get killed. And that's a high number of people for leaving, running away from the person that is abusing them. But that's a higher rate of people. I mean, it's like I said, about 90% of them that leave the abuser end up getting killed because the abuser is not going to let them go or don't want to let them go. So with the enabler, you have other family members. You might have the family hero. Family hero ends up taking the place of the enabler and taking care of everybody else in the house. Overachiever does well a lot of times. Then you also have what's known as the lost child. Lost child, a lot of times, nobody recognizes in the family that person is not seen or heard very well. And they walk around with a smile on their face, but not mentally healthy. Then you also may have what's known as the family mascot. Always got a smile on their face, always telling jokes to mask the pain or the hurt. And then as well as there is also our family scapegoat. The family scapegoat is the person that everybody else blames for all the problems. And I have read some statistics that state that the family scapegoat is usually the one person that is more likely to commit suicide than anyone else. Another downside for being in a substance abusing family is that a lot of the family members will also take on some of the ailments that the substance abuser has, whether it's heart problems or other type of illnesses and sicknesses. But a problem for the children in those substance abusing families, they are constantly told to don't tell anybody about what's going on in the family. You don't share feelings about what's going on in the family. That is, you keep that to yourselves. And it's very important that we come up with ways to help them and remind those children that they are not the cause of the problem, that they can be loved and that they can get help. And they're in a situation that can be very tough to manage and or deal with. However, they can be helped. And it can be difficult and tricky with helping children in that situation. I remember years ago, I did a training for a group of youth at a school, at a high school. And it was teaching them communication techniques, how to do reflective listening, listening for feelings. We practiced all those skills, how to use I messages and not say you're the problem or you caused this, but say I'm concerned. So we practice with that. Well, the next day, my supervisor gets a phone call from a parent, and the parent is complaining about how dare you teach my child how to communicate or use I messages with me. I'm in charge of this house. I tell her what to do, when to do, and how to do it. Now, what we didn't realize as well is that the school had selected all the children in the building that were in families that were had just recently divorced or about to get divorced. But one of the kids, she went home and she used the communication techniques and used our messages. Mom, I feel upset, or Mom, and just use our messages and such. But the mother was quite upset with that. And that could be a big challenge for any kids, because we want them to have the skills to take with them, because that's important when we're implementing prevention programs. How do we get those prevention programs or summer programs? How do we get the kids to take it with them when they go back home? How do we get them to take it back into the community to do what they do, so they don't become victims of other negative behavior, whether it's substance abuse or gun violence as well? How do we impose or get that in there? And even when I'm working with youth and I get requests from schools to go to and talk about substance abuse, I really don't spend time talking about drugs and types of drugs, because I think back as well. One of my coworkers asked me, this must have been about 15 years ago. Her son was getting ready to go to the 9th grade. She said she came to my office. She worked in our drug and alcohol safety education program. But she came down to my office and she said, "Well, Hayes, I know you're an expert on drugs, and now what I need you to do is teach me about all the drugs, so I can teach my son about all the drugs, because he's getting ready to go over to the high school, so I can tell him what to avoid." And I said, "Darling, no. It's not teaching your son about types of drugs and how to recognize drugs. That's not going to be his problem. His problem is going to be when his friends, his peers, when they walk up to him and they say, 'Come on with us,' and they start calling him names like, 'Man, you're a punk. Man, you're a fag. If you don't do this, if you don't come with us, why are you a man?' Or no, that's what we have to teach our children to do, to be able to stand up to their peers and walk on their own 2 feet, to make their own decisions. That is going to always be the greatest challenge that we have among our youth when they are offered alcohol, when they are offered heroin or prescription drugs, or when they are asked to go and participate with some type of negative behavior. And I hope I'm not hitting home on the situation, but I can remember, I think this was about 15 years ago in the city of Little Rock that this happened. And this young man took a big chunk of concrete and he threw it off one of the overpasses. And and I believe he killed, the woman died. I believe the woman died when he hit her car and she died. And during the interview with him, and they asked him, why'd you do that? And his reply was, I didn't have nothing else to do. I didn't have nothing else to do. Now, he was with some other people, but his reply to him was, I didn't have nothing else to do. Which is one of the reasons for the programs, the summer programs, all these prevention programs that we're constantly implementing and putting out there in order to address all these issues related to negative behaviors or substance abuse disorders, and how do we get that? So those programs that City of Little Rock is constantly implementing and putting out there, please keep it up. Please keep endorsing them. Yes, learn about, it's good to learn about what our current drug trends or what's out there now, what's popular now. Right now, the United States was killing, when it comes to substance abuse, was killing more Americans than any other drug is opioids or prescription opioids. And a lot of people are dying from that. I mean, the other number one killer in the United States is certainly tobacco. And people don't think about tobacco being as addictive as any other drug, but it is one of the most addictive items in the United States. And you may talk to friends who smoke and they talk about, I quit 5 times. I've attempted to quit. And it can be a difficult process because it's a chronic illness and it takes a long time to overcome and takes a lot of different ways to overcome those various problems and issues. So I'm gonna wrap us up, and some good points to share and talk to, especially if you got children, substance abuse and families, to remind those children, hey, it's not your fault. Talk to them and remind them that in most cases, their parents do love them. Unfortunately, their parent has this chronic illness or this chronic disease. It's difficult for them to overcome it. And they've got this pathological connection to it. And that's one of the issues about addiction. It's a compulsion and it is an impulse. So they don't know a lot of times when it's going to hit them. Same problem with people who are attempted to quit cigarettes. They can be doing fine, doing well, and then there's a trigger. What trigger? For a lot of people, when they finish eating, for a lot, get on the phone. So it can be different triggers. I can recall the time a coworker, we were watching a movie at the agency. And one of our substance abuse counselors, who was also in recovery, and we were watching the movie, and she got up and left. And of course, nobody gave it a second thought, but she didn't come back to work for about a week. And when she returned, she asked to meet with us all. And we were all set out to meet. Well, the movie we were watching showed someone getting ready to use heroin, which had been her drug of choice at the time when she was going through before she got into recovery. And it triggered that sensation in her. But she got up, went and called her sponsor. So she had somebody that she talked to. And that's what you'll have as well in the AA and NA. And you have somebody that you can call on, say, I got that urge, I need some help. It's also usually encouraged that in some of those groups and classes that they don't talk about the good times of being high. Don't let that, because it can trigger more. Let's go get high and for the good time. So you constantly talk about how it negatively affected your life, your family, your job, and negatively impacted you in that capacity. So you get out of that. So again, we talk to our young people and encourage them to find help, encourage them to get help. Like I said, don't attempt to do any therapy, get them the right person to work with. At this time, if anyone has any questions, please, you can ask me some questions and I'll do my very best to answer them. If you got any questions or just want to make a comment.
I got a question.
Yes.
Mr. Miller, so if you're an individual and you have a family member that's dealing with some type of addiction, and you said, don't enable them, what are some signs tells that a person might need help and they themselves don't know they need help?
Well, if you observe it, so probably the best way is that you if you observe and as well as observe any changes in behavior. You can see those changes in behavior. It's not normal behavior. Because I know I've gotten phone calls from friends of mine who were thousands of miles away, but I've gotten calls and I'm thinking something's going on. This is not you. I've gotten a call at 1 a.m. or even 3 a.m. sometimes. So it's just paying attention as well to those changes in their behavior. Also keep in mind, you can want them to go get help, but if they do not choose to go get help, you cannot make them get help. And so you can constantly encourage them to go get help, but they have to want that help. There is even some practices where they do, I can't recall the name of it, but there was even a show about it. Intervention is what they would do. So they get several family members in a room together with someone like a therapist or substance abuse counselor. But what the counselor would do is make sure that everybody had a tailor-ready speech. Say 2 minutes. That's it. Don't drag it on. Just say what you're going to say, what you're concerned about that person. And so they use it, and sometimes it's a bit of an ambush, you might say, but they bring that substance abuse into the room with those other family members and friends. They sit them down, and everybody takes a turn. They give their 2 minutes. The counselor usually there say, hey, there's a place where you go if you want to go. Why don't you come on and get some help? So there are situations like that happen. There used to be a show. I know I've watched it several times as well. But it's important to just constantly tell that person, if you got somebody who you recognize they're in need of help, just constantly encourage them, go get help, go get help, go get help, go get help. You know what? Yes.
What about those that drink socially, like going after work and feel like they need a little alcohol to relax? I've heard that a lot.
Right.
Can you become an alcoholic doing that?
Oh, you can become addicted to any type of substance. I mean, something that's going to be different for everybody is our body types, how we process whatever the substance is out of our bodies as well. So where one person may quickly become addicted, it may take someone else over time. And then you also may have cases where there are other risk factors where they're stressed out at work, maybe the family life is stressed out, or maybe they're having financial situations. But yes, and then you have those people that are what are called weekend alcoholics, right? And they just wait till the weekend. I know someone who did that for years until it just finally ruined their lives. Really, I mean, it affected their job. They lost their job, and it just started to impact their whole life. But they would go Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Wouldn't touch alcohol, even if someone offered it to them. But Friday night, tore down drunk. Saturday night, tore down drunk. Get up, go to church on Sunday. Go to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Friday night, tore down drunk again. Tore down drunk on Saturday.
But they had to realize themselves that they were alcoholics before they got it.
They can realize it. And again, the problem with a chronic disease like addiction is that it's extremely hard for them to break that cycle and get out of it. That's the problem. They can even recognize it. They can even say to themselves, yes, I'm an addict. You've probably even seen movies where people proclaim, yeah, I know, I'm an addict. One of my favorites was that movie with Samuel L. Jackson, when he really came out. He played a crack addict, and I heard in one of the scenes he proclaimed. He said to Mama, you know I'm an addict. I'm an addict. That's what I am. That's what I do. But the problem is he cannot control him. He couldn't. I mean, as in real life, addictive behavior that cannot control themselves, it's an impulse, and they may do okay. And that's what you also find as well when individuals start to get into treatment and getting help, then you may have cases where people who go into treatment, 80% of them are going to relapse, and that is they may go back to that addictive behavior, and then they'll go back to get some more treatment. And then even out of that group that go back to get help, probably 50% of them will relapse again until they go back and get some more help. Now, but again, that is the problem. That problem with it, and that's why it's defined as a chronic illness. It's out of their control.
Or the weekend drinkers. Oh, I could just quit if I want.
Right. Yeah, that's what people, you hear people say that all the time about marijuana. Now I don't have to, now I don't need, and as well as you'll have people say that marijuana is not addictive. Well, it is. Any type of substance, any type of substance that can be injected into the body, you can develop a pathological connection to it and start telling yourself. I love when Richard Pryor would tell his jokes, and then I think in one of his in the movie he did about his life, and how his crack pipe was in the other room, the door was locked, but there was this voice. When he come in the house, that voice will start talking to him. Richard, come on in. It's me. Who loves you more than anybody? I've never treated you badly. We've always been great friends. Come on in here. And so, I mean, we make light of that, but for a lot of people, that's extremely difficult to overcome and to battle. And that's part of it. Again, it's a compulsion or impulse that hits them. And it can take a long time for them to overcome it and deal with it. Yeah. All right. Appreciate the questions, and thank you all for letting me come on over and speak with you. We'll all be happy when COVID is dead and gone, so we can get out and see people in person and hug them.
Well, thank you, Mr. Miller. We appreciate you for coming to the city of Little Rock today to present this to us. Thank you everyone for attending to today's Lunch and Learn. I hope you learned something very valuable that you can take with you. So we're gonna wrap it up now, and thank you all again, and we'll see y'all next time.
All right.
Yes, very well done. Thank
Thank you. Now, anybody tell you look like Opie's brother? I heard that more than I can say.